There are strange mornings. And then there are mornings where Claire Donovan wakes up inside a minivan with a dog drooling on her neck and her 8-year-old daughter insisting the universe is trying to communicate through sneeze patterns. For Claire, this particular Monday in late October was definitively the second kind. The sun had barely managed to push a soft peach glow across the edge of the Walmart parking lot where Claire had parked the previous night, carefully choosing a spot far enough from the entrance to avoid security detention, but close enough to the streetlights for safety. Already Emma was sitting bolt upright in the sleeping bag they shared, blinking at the van's dusty ceiling like it contained answers to questions nobody had thought to ask yet. Her daughter's voice came out in a dramatic stage whisper. "Mom, I heard it again. A sneeze, a ghost sneeze." Beside her bear, an enthusiastic Labrador mix with the emotional stability of a bowl of jelly and the decision-making skills of a broken compass, wagged his entire backside in what appeared to be aggressive agreement. He sneezed directly into Claire's face, then barked at his own sneeze with genuine surprise, then circled twice in the cramped space before sitting proudly on Claire's foot as if he'd just solved quantum physics. Claire groaned, rubbing sleep from her eyes with hands that smelled faintly of the citrus hand soap from the gas station bathroom they'd used the night before. Her voice came out rough, scraped raw by exhaustion and 3 months of sleeping at angles the human spine was never designed to tolerate. Soph, the only ghost in this van, is Bear's appetite, which apparently survived the night intact. The dog promptly attempted to eat the empty granola wrapper wedged between the seats, just to prove her point. Emma giggled, a sound so pure it physically hurt Claire's chest. How her daughter could wake up laughing in a 15-year-old minivan that smelled like wet dog and broken promises was a mystery Claire couldn't solve. Maybe children just hadn't learned yet that optimism was supposed to come with an expiration date. Their little family, such as it was, had been living out of the faded blue van for 3 months now. 87 days, if Claire was counting, which she absolutely was because insomnia had a way of turning every night into an involuntary math exercise. Claire never liked the word homeless. It made her feel like she was missing something essential, some fundamental human component that other people possessed. She preferred to think of it as temporarily between addresses, which sounded far more adventurous, like they'd chosen this lifestyle, like they were explorers charting new territory. Very poor explorers with questionable hygiene and a dog who considered gas station parking lots his personal kingdom. The reality was less romantic. The van had been a last resort after the apartment eviction, which had followed the job loss at the manufacturing plant, which had followed the divorce from Emma's father, who decided fatherhood looked better in the rearview mirror than through the windshield. Claire had a degree in mechanical engineering that hadn't mattered when the plant closed. She had 10 years of experience rebuilding engines that hadn't mattered when potential employers saw her address listed as a P.O. box. She had references and recommendations that hadn't mattered when the world decided she was the wrong age, wrong gender, wrong everything for the positions that actually paid enough to afford first, last, and security deposit. So now she had Emma and Bear in a minivan with a transmission that ground like millstones and a dashboard that lit up like a particularly aggressive Christmas display every time she turned the key. They managed. They survived. Some days that felt like victory enough. Claire reached over the driver's seat and handed Emma her socks, one patterned with yellow stars, the other featuring tacos riding skateboards. Emma refused to match anything, including logic, which Claire privately admired even as it made mornings slightly more chaotic than necessary. "Put these on, sweetheart. School doesn't let you in barefoot." Emma pulled on the socks with exaggerated concentration, her small face serious. "I bet they would if the school floor was made of grass." Claire half smiled, the expression pulling at muscles in her face that had forgotten how. If the school floor were grass, Bear would pee on it. Bear wagged harder at the sound of his name, proud of something he wasn't entirely sure about, but committed to celebrating anyway. Emma dissolved into laughter again, and for exactly 3 seconds, Claire let herself believe this life was sustainable. After oatmeal heated on their tiny camping stove, wedged behind the passenger seat, and a frantic brushing of teeth using the van's side mirror and water from a gallon jug that tasted faintly of plastic, Claire and Emma walked to the bus stop 6 blocks away. Bear bounced along beside them like a furry trampoline, occasionally stopping to investigate smells that apparently contained vital intelligence about the neighborhood's social dynamics. The October air carried that particular Pennsylvania chill that promised winter was coming, but hadn't committed to a timeline yet. Claire pulled Emma's jacket tighter around her shoulders, noting the way the zipper caught halfway up, the way the sleeves were starting to ride high on her daughter's wrists. Growing. Emma was growing, and Claire couldn't afford to keep up. At the curb, Emma tightened the straps of her backpack, a hand-me-down from the church donation bin that was designed for a much older child and made her look like a turtle carrying its entire house. She looked up at Claire with worry that didn't belong on such a small face, worry that made Claire want to punch every circumstance that had led them here. "Mom, do you think we'll have a real house again someday?" Claire bent down, her knees protesting, and straightened her daughter's collar with hands that were steadier than she felt. Her voice came out soft, wrapped in all the false confidence she could manufacture at 7:30 in the morning. "I think we will. I don't know how yet, but I promise I'm trying." Emma nodded slowly, like she was deciding whether to believe, like she was testing the weight of hope against the evidence of their current situation. Bear licked Emma's hand in solidarity, or possibly because she smelled faintly of instant oatmeal and syrup. The school bus wheezed to a stop with the sound of hydraulic surrender. Emma climbed the steps, turning back to wave through the window until the bus turned the corner, and Claire's daughter disappeared into the portion of the day where Claire couldn't protect her. Then it was just Claire and Bear standing in the chilly morning air of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a town that had been slowly collapsing in on itself since before Claire was born. Half the downtown shops were boarded up, their windows covered in plywood that had been painted over so many times the original wood grain was just a memory. The movie theater was now home to pigeons with questionable manners and no respect for architectural heritage. The steel mill that had built this town had closed in the 80s, and Millbrook had been bleeding population ever since, a slow hemorrhage nobody seemed capable of stopping. The only business that appeared to be thriving was a shop called Tony's Tires and Tacos, which, despite the deeply misleading name, did not actually serve tacos. Claire found this personally offensive on a level she couldn't quite articulate. False advertising should come with penalties, particularly when a person was hungry and willing to believe in impossible things like taco shops in dying Pennsylvania towns. But there was one place that had always felt solid, anchored in a way the rest of Millbrook wasn't. Martinez Grocery and Odds and Ends occupied a corner building that looked like it predated the steel mill, maybe predated the town itself. The brick facade had weathered into something almost beautiful, and the hand-painted sign above the door had been repainted so many times the letters had taken on a life of their own, thick and cheerful against the faded red background. Vera Martinez was 74 years old, sharp as a tack that had been professionally sharpened and then given graduate-level education and tactical awareness. She was warm as a freshly baked muffin and had the unusual superpower of knowing everything happening in town approximately 15 minutes before it actually occurred. Which was why Claire always stopped by, even though coffee cost money she didn't have, and Vera's pity made her skin crawl in ways she tried hard not to show. The bell chimed as Claire pushed open the door, Bear trotting in behind her like he owned the place. The smell hit her instantly, coffee and produce and something baking in the back. The scent of a life that included meals served at tables instead of camping stoves wedged between car seats. It was comforting and real and painful all at once. Vera looked up from behind the register, her gray hair pinned into a bun that had not moved since 1974 and probably wouldn't move until the heat death of the universe. Her dark eyes took in Claire's appearance with the efficiency of an X-ray machine. "You look like you slept in a van." Claire made her way to the coffee pot by the register, the one Vera kept perpetually full for reasons Claire suspected had more to do with gathering intelligence than hospitality. Her response came out dry. "I did sleep in a van, and it's rude to guess correctly before coffee." Vera poured her a mug without being asked, the ceramic one with the chipped handle, not the paper cup reserved for strangers and tourists who wandered through approximately once every solar eclipse. Claire wrapped her hands around the warmth, feeling the heat seep into fingers that were always cold now, permanently chilled in a way hot coffee couldn't quite fix but helped anyway. "So," Claire blew on the coffee, watching steam curl in the morning light filtering through the front windows. "No new job openings, I suppose?" Vera leaned against the counter with the posture of someone settling in for a conversation she'd been preparing. "Not unless you want to be a professional zucchini picker for Mr. Howard." but he pays in zucchini, which I realize creates a circular economic problem. Claire groaned. I'll pass. Bear gets emotional when I cook vegetables. Bear barked as if confirming this statement, which was accurate. He did in fact take steamed broccoli very personally, as if vegetables were a direct insult to his carnivorous heritage. Vera clicked her tongue, a sound that conveyed both sympathy and frustration in equal measure. You know, Claire, you can stay in my spare room, just until you get back on your feet. Lord knows the space is sitting empty. Claire smiled softly, the expression not quite reaching her eyes but close enough for social purposes. I appreciate it, really. But if I'm taking help from anyone, I want it to be something I've earned. The words came out more defensive than she'd intended, but she couldn't help it. Pride tasted like pennies in her mouth, metallic and bitter, but it was one of the few things she had left that felt like hers. Vera's charity would come with unspoken debts, with gratitude that would sit in Claire's stomach like stones. She needed to solve this herself, needed to prove she wasn't broken beyond repair. Vera's expression softened into something dangerously close to understanding. Pride tastes worse than zucchini, sweetheart. I'll take my chances. As Claire sipped her coffee, something caught her eye. A flyer taped near the counter, slightly crooked, printed on bright yellow paper that screamed for attention. The words jumped out at her with the force of a dare. Abandoned storage auction today only. Millbrook Industrial Yard, lots cheap, contents unknown, starts at $300. Bear sneezed enthusiastically at the flyer, spraying droplets across the yellow paper, as if blessing it with holy water. Vera noticed the direction of Claire's gaze, and her face immediately arranged itself into an expression of profound skepticism. Oh, don't you dare! Claire's voice came out innocent, which was suspicious by default, and they both knew it. What? I know that look. That's the I'm about to do something bold and potentially dumb look. I've seen that look on 3 husbands and 2 sons, and it never ended well. It is not. It absolutely was. Claire could feel the expression on her own face, the mixture of desperation and calculation that probably glowed like neon in the morning light. She was considering it, actually considering spending money she couldn't afford to lose on something that was statistically more likely to contain expired ketchup packets than anything useful. Vera narrowed her eyes into slits that could have cut glass. You have $300 to your name. 312, Claire corrected, her voice defensive. And 40 cents. The 40 cents felt important somehow, like it proved she was keeping track, like it proved she had control over her financial situation, even if that situation was objectively terrible. Vera's expression could have frozen lava. Claire Donovan, don't you go throwing money away on rusty mystery boxes. I've lived here long enough to know those auctions are where dreams go to develop tetanus. Claire opened her mouth to reply, to offer some reasonable explanation for why this was actually a perfectly sensible decision, but then Bear stood up on his hind legs and put one paw directly on the flyer. He stared at Claire with those liquid brown eyes that held absolutely zero cognitive reasoning but infinite emotional conviction. He sneezed again, louder this time, like he was making a point. Normally, she would ignore her dog's sneeze-based decision-making process, would laugh it off as coincidence and questionable canine sinuses. But something about this moment felt different. Bear's encouragement, Emma's hopeful face from earlier asking about a real house, the tug in Claire's chest that felt like maybe the universe nudging her towards something. Or maybe the universe had allergies and was communicating through her dog's respiratory system. Hard to tell. The thought bubbled up before she could stop it. Ridiculous and impossible, and somehow perfect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bet your last dollar on yourself. Her voice came out slowly, testing the words as she spoke them. Vera, I think I should go. Vera sighed with the weariness of someone who'd watched too many people make bad decisions and had learned that arguing only made them dig in harder. She reached under the counter and pulled out a muffin wrapped in wax paper, blueberry from the smell, and handed it to Claire like a peace offering, or possibly a last meal. Fine, but if you come back with a crate full of expired ketchup packets, don't cry to me about it. Bear wagged as if this was the greatest idea ever proposed in human history, possibly including the invention of fire and the domestication of wolves. Claire took the muffin, feeling its weight in her hand, feeling the weight of the decision settling onto her shoulders like a coat she wasn't sure she could carry. She had $312.40. She had a daughter who deserved better than a minivan. She had a dog who believed in her unconditionally, even if his judgment was questionable. She had nothing to lose except everything. 1 hour later, Claire stood in a gravel lot behind the Millbrook Industrial Storage Facility, staring at rows of corrugated metal containers that looked like they contained either treasure or disappointment in equal proportion. The facility smelled like rust and rain and abandoned dreams. About 40 people had gathered, most of them looking like they did this regularly, professional bargain hunters with the hollow eyes of people who'd learned to see value in other people's forgotten things. The auctioneer stood on a wooden crate, megaphone in hand, calling out lot numbers with the rhythm of a carnival barker. He was 60-something with a beard that looked like it had its own weather system and a voice that could carry across state lines. Lot 22, going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the Steelers cap for $250. Claire's hands were sweating despite the October chill. She'd withdrawn $300 in cash from the ATM, watching her account balance drop to $12.40, with a sense of vertigo that made her stomach lurch. Bear sat beside her, tail sweeping dust in dramatic arcs, sensing something important was happening, even if he couldn't articulate what. Lot 23A, the auctioneer's voice cracked across the lot. Heavy item, vehicle of some sort, according to the manifest. Been here 4 years, Rose Callahan Estate, starting bid $200. Claire's heart kicked against her ribs. A vehicle. That could be anything from a golf cart to a commercial truck. But the words sent electricity through her nervous system. Her father had taught her engines, had taught her that machines were just puzzles that ran on combustion and faith. If it was a vehicle, maybe she could fix it. Maybe she could sell it. Maybe it was something useful. 200, called a voice to her left. Claire turned to see a middle-aged man in an expensive leather jacket, the kind of person who bought storage units as a hobby rather than a desperation move. He had the confidence of someone who could afford to lose money on bad bets. 225, another voice called. Claire's mouth went dry. The bidding was moving fast, and she was already priced out if it went much higher. She raised her hand, surprising herself with the motion. 250. The man in the leather jacket glanced at her, assessed her worn jeans and thrift store coat, and raised his own hand with casual arrogance. 275. Claire's pulse hammered in her ears. She had 300 total. If she went higher, she'd have nothing left for food, for the inevitable, unexpected disaster that seemed to strike whenever her bank account dropped below $20. But something in her chest pulled tight, that same feeling she'd had looking at Bear's paw on the flyer. The feeling that said this mattered, that this was the door she was supposed to walk through, even if she couldn't see what was on the other side. 300! Her voice came out stronger than she felt. The man in the leather jacket studied her for a long moment, then shrugged and turned away. Apparently 300 wasn't worth fighting a broke woman and her emotional support dog over. The auctioneer's megaphone crackled. 300 going once, going twice, sold to the lady with the enthusiastic dough. Relief and terror hit Claire simultaneously. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd spent every dollar she had on a mystery vehicle that could be anything from a classic car to a rusted-out shopping cart. Bear barked triumphantly, like he'd personally negotiated the deal. The auctioneer climbed down from his crate and approached with a clipboard and a set of bolt cutters that looked like they'd been used to cut through bank vaults. Congratulations. You'll need to clear the unit by end of day. Oh, and there's a $47 towing fee if you need the vehicle removed. Cash only. Claire's stomach dropped. $47? Storage facility policy. Item weighs over 2,000 pounds, requires professional removal, unless you got a way to haul it yourself. Claire didn't have $47. She had $12.40. The van's trailer hitch had rusted off 2 years ago. She stood there, victory curdling into panic, trying to figure out how to explain to the auctioneer that she'd made a terrible mistake. Then she remembered. The center console of the van. She'd been throwing loose change in there for months. Quarters from parking meters and dimes from return bottles. It was her emergency fund for emergencies so small they didn't qualify for the actual emergency fund. Give me 5 minutes. She ran back to the van, Bear loping beside her in confusion. She yanked open the console and started digging, pulling out handfuls of coins mixed with old receipts and fossilized French fries. She counted frantically, stacking quarters and dimes on the passenger seat while Bear watched with intense interest, as if this was a game he didn't quite understand but supported anyway. $22 in quarters, $11 in dimes, $8 in nickels, $6.17 in pennies, total $47.17. She scooped the coins into her jacket pockets, feeling the weight drag on her shoulders as she walked back to the auctioneer. She dumped the coins onto his clipboard, a waterfall of metal that represented every return bottle, every couch cushion she'd searched, every parking meter that had given back change. The auctioneer looked at the pile, then at Claire, then back at the pile. Something in his expression softened. "This'll do. Let me get you the bolt cutters." He handed her the heavy tools, and Claire approached Unit 23A with hands that trembled slightly. The container looked like every other one in the lot, corrugated metal painted an industrial shade of give-up, the number scratched into the side in white paint that had faded to gray. Bear sniffed at the base of the door, tail starting to accelerate. The auctioneer called after her. "People find weird stuff in these things. Once found 600 ceramic frogs. Another time, life-size statue of Dolly Parton. And one fellow found a raccoon wearing a vest. Not taxidermy either. Real raccoon. Terrible attitude." Claire swallowed. "Okay then." She positioned the bolt cutters on the lock, a heavy master padlock that had rusted into permanence. Bear sat beside her, tail sweeping dust in dramatic anticipation, like he was waiting for a curtain to rise on opening night. Claire squeezed the handles, feeling resistance, then sudden release as the lock clanged to the gravel. She hesitated, hand on the door handle. Everything she had was gone. $312.40 reduced to $12.40, now reduced to absolute zero. This was either the best decision of her life or the moment she'd look back on as the beginning of the end. Her voice came out soft. "Here goes everything, Bear." She swung the door open. A smell drifted out, immediate and unexpected. Dust and flour and something sweet. Cinnamon, maybe? Wrapped in the staleness of 4 years sealed away from sunlight. And then there it was, filling almost the entire container, huge and round and cheerfully ridiculous. A bakery truck. Pink and white stripes spiraled across the body like peppermint candy. A giant cupcake grinned from the side panel, its frosting painted in swirls that probably looked cute in 1994 and now looked vaguely unhinged. The eyes slightly misaligned in a way that suggested it had seen things and would never speak of them. The truck sat on flat tires, rust spots blooming along the wheel wells, the windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern that caught the light. Across the side, in letters that had faded from bright pink to dusty rose, the name announced itself with unearned confidence. Sugar and Spice Mobile Bakery. Bear barked, absolutely losing his mind with delight, tail becoming a weapon of mass joy. Claire just stared, her brain trying to process what she was seeing. A bakery truck. She'd spent her last dollar on a bakery truck. One sentence escaped her mouth, soft and stunned. "Why does it smell like cinnamon?" She stepped inside the container, heart pounding, and not from fear but from something she couldn't name. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The truck filled the space like a sleeping giant, and Claire felt suddenly small and very brave, and possibly very stupid. Bear bounded ahead, sniffing everything with scientific intensity. Claire approached the truck slowly, her mechanic's eye automatically cataloging damage. Flat tires, definitely. Cracked windshield. Rust. But the frame looked solid, the body intact despite the years. The commercial oven built into the side was dusty but undamaged. This wasn't junk. This was a real truck, a real business vehicle, something with actual value if she could get it running. She grabbed the side handle and pulled. The door groaned open with a sound like a haunted bakery in a low-budget movie. Inside, dust motes floated like confused fairies in the shaft of afternoon light. A row of shelves lined the back wall, stacked with old baking pans, paper cups, frosting bags with dried-out tips, and inexplicably, a rubber chicken wearing a miniature chef's hat. Claire blinked. Okay, sure, normal. Bear immediately grabbed the rubber chicken and began parading around with it, squeaking it violently in what appeared to be a ritual celebration of new friendship. The sound echoed in the metal container, absurd and somehow perfect. Claire climbed into the driver's seat, feeling the cracked vinyl under her hands. Everything was dusty but intact. The steering wheel, the faded pink dashboard with its array of gauges that probably told lies. The glove box held shut with duct tape that had gone brittle with age. Above the windshield, a cracked sticker read, "Making Tuesdays bearable since 1994. On the passenger side, a laminated menu card had slipped halfway under the seat. Claire pulled it out, reading items that sounded like someone had weaponized whimsy. Cinnamon sky swirls, lemon twisters, mystery muffin, guess the flavor, and Ethel's famous surprise buns. No refunds. Claire squinted. Surprise buns with no refunds feels like a legal liability. Bear continued squeaking the rubber chicken, which she chose to interpret as agreement. Then her eyes fell on something resting on the dashboard, partially hidden under a faded road map. A small pink spiral notebook, its cover decorated with hand-drawn cupcakes and words written in purple marker. Do not open. Seriously, don't. Rose. Claire sat back, the notebook in her hands. Rose. Rose Callahan. The woman whose estate this was, whose truck this had been, whose life was now somehow intersecting with Claire's in ways that made her chest feel tight. She opened the notebook. Inside, written in bubbly handwriting that suggested its author had never met a loop she didn't want to embellish, pages filled with recipes and margin notes and little doodles of cupcakes engaged in what appeared to be warfare with muffins. There was a heartfelt rant about how Rose's ex-husband did not appreciate the emotional complexities of chiffon cakes and should frankly be exiled to a desert island with nothing but box mix. There were recipe adjustments, temperature notes, a small pressed flour that had turned brown with age, and then, right near the middle, a page that made Claire's breath catch. The title read, "If you're reading this, it means the truck is yours now." Claire's hands started to shake. She kept reading, Rose's voice coming through the ink like a message in a bottle that had finally washed ashore. Don't panic, the truck is safe. Mostly, I never got to finish my dream with Sugar and Spice 2.0. Life got in the way, which is what life does when you're busy making other plans. But if life brought you here, maybe it means you should finish what I started. Maybe you're supposed to take this ridiculous pink truck and make something beautiful out of it. P.S. Don't start the engine until you check behind the seat. Important surprise. Not alive. Probably. Claire stared at the page. Bear had stopped squeaking the chicken and was watching her with intense concentration, as if he understood the gravity of the moment better than she did. Probably, Claire repeated to the empty truck. The word hung in the dusty air like a question mark. She leaned over carefully, reaching behind the driver's seat where the padding had compressed into geological layers over decades of use. Her fingers found an edge, something cardboard, and she pulled. A box tumbled out, landing at her feet with a puff of dust that made her cough. Bear stared at it. Claire stared at it. They both braced for something, though neither could have articulated what. She lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of unopened bags of flour, the kind that came in bulk from restaurant suppliers. 2 boxes of cupcake liners, still wrapped in plastic. A pink apron that read, "Flour Power" in glittery letters that had mostly flaked off. And underneath all of that, carefully folded, a lumpy quilt-like object that Claire pulled out slowly. It was a full-body cupcake costume. The thing was magnificent in its absurdity. Pink frosting-shaped foam, sprinkles that appeared to be hand-sewn from felt, a face hole in the frosting swirl where a human head would presumably emerge like a confused pastry. The whole thing smelled like storage and dreams deferred and possibly mothballs. Claire burst out laughing, loud enough that the sound bounced off the metal container and startled Bear into barking at the truck itself. She couldn't help it. She'd spent her last dollar on a dead bakery truck that came with a cupcake costume. Her life had become a joke with a punchline she couldn't quite parse yet. "This is ridiculous," she said to Bear, to the truck, to the universe that had brought her here? Completely ridiculous. She held up the cupcake suit, examining it in the afternoon light filtering through the container door. The craftsmanship was actually impressive, the kind of thing someone had spent real time creating with real love. Whoever Rose was, she'd believed in this truck enough to commission a cupcake costume. That took a particular kind of beautiful delusion. But there was something else in the box. Claire set the costume aside and pulled out a weathered leather journal, its cover cracked like desert earth. She opened it carefully, and her heart kicked when she saw what was inside. Mechanical diagrams, detailed, precise sketches of the truck's engine, labeled with part numbers and specifications. Rose's handwriting filled the margins with notes that read like love letters to machinery. Feb 3, 1998. Replace starter motor. Bosch SR442X. Check every 50K miles. July 12, 2003. Alternator belt slipping. Measured 27.5 circumference. Replaced with Gates KO60270. Page after page of repair logs, maintenance schedules, troubleshooting notes, diagrams of the electrical system with wires color-coded and annotated. A complete service history spanning 15 years, written in Rose's neat mechanical hand, documenting every time she'd crawled under this truck and made it work again. The last entry stopped Claire cold. The handwriting looked rushed, less controlled than earlier entries. Engine running rough. Suspect fuel injector number 3. Didn't have time to fix before storage. Next owner you'll need, socket set, fuel line wrench, patience. So much patience. But she's worth it. Trust me. Claire touched the page, her fingers tracing the ink, and for a moment she could almost see it. Rose, grease under her fingernails, lying under this truck in some driveway, figuring out how to keep her dream running on determination and YouTube videos. Rose, who'd fixed this truck herself for 15 years. Rose, who'd left detailed instructions for a future owner she'd never meet. Her throat felt tight. She fixed this herself for 15 years. Bear had abandoned the rubber chicken and was now sitting beside her, his warm weight against her leg, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this ridiculous situation. Claire looked at the journal, at the costume, at the bags of flour that were probably expired but represented intention anyway. Rose had meant for someone to find this, had prepared for it, had left everything someone would need to restart Sugar and Spice, except the one thing that mattered most. Money. Claire tried the key still dangling from the ignition. Nothing. Completely dead. She climbed out and walked around the truck, her trained eye cataloging damage in a way that made her chest tight. The battery was dead, obviously, had probably been dead for years. The tires were flat, the rubber cracked and dry rotted beyond salvation. She popped the hood, and the smell of old oil hit her immediately. The engine was dusty but intact. No obvious, catastrophic damage, but it would need everything. Oil change, filters, probably new hoses, definitely new belts. The fuel system had probably gummed up from sitting. The brake lines might be corroded. The registration was expired by 4 years. She pulled out her phone and did quick math based on parts costs she remembered from her father's shop. Battery, $140. Tires, at least $400 for used ones. Oil, filters, fluids, another $100. Registration and inspection, probably $500 if she was lucky. And that was assuming nothing major was broken, assuming the engine would even turn over, assuming any of this was actually feasible. Total estimate, minimum $800 to get this thing road legal. Maybe $1,200 to get it actually functional. Claire had $12.40 in her bank account. She stood there in the container, surrounded by the smell of cinnamon and dust and impossible dreams, and felt the full weight of what she'd done crash down on her like a collapsing ceiling. She'd spent everything on a truck she couldn't fix, on a business she couldn't start, on a dream that belonged to someone else, someone who'd had the resources and time and stability to make it work. Claire had none of those things. She had a daughter who deserved dinner. She had a dog who needed kibble. She had a minivan that barely ran, and now a bakery truck that definitely didn't. For a long moment, she just stood there, hands on the truck's dusty hood, breathing the stale container air. This was it. This was the moment she'd remember as the time she finally broke. The time she ran out of faith in momentum and whatever chemical in the brain makes people believe tomorrow might be different from today. Then Bear walked over and sat on her foot. He did this sometimes when he sensed she needed anchoring. His warm weight pressed down, solid and real. He looked up at her with those ridiculous brown eyes, and somehow that helped. Dogs didn't understand bad decisions. They just understood being together. Claire's voice came out steady, surprising herself. Okay, one step at a time. First, we get it out of here. She walked back to the auctioneer's booth, Bear trotting beside her. The man was packing up his clipboard and looked unsurprised to see her return. Need that tow after all? Already paid for it, Claire said, handing him the $47.17 in change. He looked at the pile of coins, then at her, then sighed like a man who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Where do you want it delivered? Claire gave him the address of Martinez Grocery. Vera would hate it, but Vera would also let her park there because beneath the sarcasm was a woman who understood desperation. The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later, a flatbed driven by a man who'd clearly given up on conversations somewhere around 1987. He loaded the bakery truck with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and didn't care about the stories anymore. Claire followed in her van, watching the pink and white truck ahead of her on the flatbed. So absurd and so perfect that she wanted to laugh and cry simultaneously. Emma would be getting off the school bus in an hour. Claire had no idea how to explain this. Had no idea how to explain that she'd spent their grocery money on a bakery truck with a cupcake mascot that looked like it had witnessed war crimes. The drive back to Millbrook took 15 minutes, and every minute Claire's mind churned through possibilities and disasters in equal measure. The truck cost money she didn't have, but if she could get it running, if she could somehow scrape together the parts, maybe she could sell it. Maybe someone would pay $1,500 for a functional bakery truck. That would cover the repair costs and leave her with profit. Or maybe she could use it. Learn to bake, start an actual business, be the kind of person who owned a business instead of living in a van. The thought was so absurd, it almost circled back to reasonable. She didn't know how to bake. She'd burned instant pudding once, but she did know how to fix engines, and Rose had left recipes. And the universe, apparently communicating through Bear's sinuses, seemed to think this was meant to happen. By the time they pulled into the parking lot behind Martinez Grocery, Claire had talked herself into cautious optimism approximately 7 times and back into despair approximately 8 times. The tow truck driver unloaded the bakery truck with mechanical precision, then drove away without commentary. The truck sat there in the afternoon light, pink and white and ridiculous, a monument to either possibility or poor judgment. Bear immediately peed on one of the flat tires, which Claire chose to interpret as a blessing. Vera stepped out of the store's back door, took one look at the truck, and her expression cycled through surprise, resignation, and something that might have been admiration so deeply buried it took archaeological tools to find. Oh, good heavens, it's a cupcake on wheels. Claire felt defensive about the truck already, which was irrational given that she'd owned it for approximately 2 hours. It's a business vehicle, a commercial bakery truck. It's pink. Historically, pink has been a very successful marketing color. Vera walked closer, circling the truck slowly. Her hand reached out to touch the faded lettering, her fingers tracing the words sugar and spice like she was reading Braille. Something in her expression shifted, softened into memory. I know this truck. Claire's heart kicked. What do you mean? Vera's voice came out quieter than Claire had ever heard it, almost reverent. Rose Callahan. She used to park right here, this exact spot, every Thursday morning. Sold lemon tarts that were too sweet, though I told her that every week. She told me I was too bitter to appreciate proper baking. We agreed to disagree while I bought 6 tarts because spite is an excellent sales strategy. Claire stepped closer. What happened to her? Vera's hand dropped from the truck. Disappeared 6 months ago, maybe 7. Her nephew Scott came by, said she'd moved to Arizona to be with cousins. Put her things in storage, but it never made sense. Rose hated heat, complained about summer like it was a personal insult from God. Arizona would have been hell for her. Did you try to find her? I sent a Christmas card to the Arizona address Scott gave me. Never heard back. Vera shook her head. Who listens to old women with bad feelings? Besides, Scott's a lawyer, professional, respectful. If he said she moved, she moved. But Vera's voice carried doubt, and Claire filed that information away for later. She pulled Rose's notebook from her jacket pocket and showed Vera the message. If you're reading this, the truck is yours now. Vera read it slowly, her lips moving slightly. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. That sounds exactly like Rose. Always planning 7 steps ahead. Always believing the universe would sort itself if you gave it enough options. She looked at Claire with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. You know what you have here, don't you? A truck that doesn't run? A chance, Rose's last gift to whoever needed it most. She was like that, believed in paying forward every kindness anyone ever showed her. Claire felt the weight of that settling onto her shoulders, heavier than she expected. I don't know how to bake. Rose didn't either when she started. Burned 3 batches before she made anything edible. She told me that first Thursday, proud as anything, like burning baked goods, was an accomplishment worth celebrating. The school bus wheezed to a stop at the corner. Emma would be walking here in 3 minutes. Claire suddenly felt panicked about how to explain the truck, about how to frame this disaster as anything other than what it was. Then Emma appeared around the corner, backpack bouncing, and she saw the truck. She stopped dead. Her mouth fell open. And then she ran, actually ran toward them with Bear loping beside her in confused solidarity. Mom, Mom, Mom! Emma's voice climbed in pitch with each repetition. Did you get anything from the auction? Did you get treasure? Did you? She stopped, staring up at the bakery truck. Her face transformed into something Claire hadn't seen in months. Pure, uncomplicated joy that made Claire's chest hurt. Oh my gosh! Emma covered her mouth with both hands. It's beautiful. Claire raised an eyebrow. Beautiful? It's pink. Emma's eyes went wide with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. Everything pink is beautiful, except flamingos. They're suspicious. Bear wagged his entire body in fierce agreement, having apparently harbored his own concerns about flamingo trustworthiness. Claire wondered if this was how chaos officially started, with 8-year-olds declaring pink trucks beautiful and dogs validating flamingo skepticism. Emma climbed into the truck through the open back door before Claire could stop her. Her daughter's voice echoed from inside. Mom, there's equipment in here. And look, Bear found a friend. She emerged holding the rubber chicken, now thoroughly covered in Bear's saliva. Bear squeaked it triumphantly, as if he'd personally discovered a new species. Emma's face glowed with the kind of happiness that made bad decisions feel almost worth it. Then Emma's gaze landed on the cupcake costume, still visible through the open truck door. She gasped with the force of religious conversion. Is that for me? It's for whoever wants to wear it. The words were out before Claire could consider the implications. Emma tackled the costume like a tiger pouncing on a particularly stupid gazelle. She wiggled into it immediately, emerging as a human sprinkle explosion, with her face poking through the frosting hole, her arms sticking out at odd angles that suggested the costume had been designed for someone with a different understanding of human anatomy. Mom, Emma's voice came out muffled through the foam. I'm delicious. Bear barked approvingly, possibly thinking Emma was an actual pastry now and wondering about the ethics of the situation. Vera made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been despair. Claire couldn't help it. She started laughing, really laughing, the kind that hurt her stomach and made her eyes water. This was insane. She'd spent her last dollar on a truck that didn't run, and her daughter was wearing a cupcake costume in a grocery store parking lot, and her dog was squeaking a rubber chicken like it was his job. This was not how responsible adults solved their problems. This was how sitcom characters created complications for the second act. But Emma was smiling, really smiling, and that counted for something. Emma climbed into the driver's seat, the costume making the simple action into a complex physics problem. She looked at her mother with eyes that held too much hope for Claire to safely look at directly. Mom, do you think we could fix it? Claire bit her lip. Could they? The truck needed money she didn't have, parts she couldn't afford, and skills she only half remembered from watching her father work. The engine might be seized, the transmission might be shot. There could be mice living in the air filter and bees in the exhaust system and any number of expensive problems hiding under that faded pink hood. But Emma was looking at her with hope, and Bear was sitting beside her daughter wagging his tail. And somewhere in this ridiculous situation was the ghost of Rose Callahan, who'd maintained this truck for 15 years with her own hands and left detailed instructions for someone brave enough to try. Claire's voice came out softer than she intended. "Well, what if we just trio?" Emma squealed so loudly the cupcake truck shook. Bear barked, Vera shook her head but was smiling, and Claire felt something shift in her chest. Something that might have been hope or might have been delusion, but felt warm either way. That evening, after Emma was asleep in the van and Bear was snoring with the rubber chicken clutched between his paws, Claire sat in the truck's driver's seat with a flashlight, reading Rose's mechanical journal cover to cover. The entries spanned 15 years of repairs, adjustments, and the kind of persistent maintenance that kept impossible dreams running on duct tape and determination. She found the photo tucked into the back page, a Polaroid, faded and creased, showing an elderly woman in a pink apron holding a tray of cupcakes. She was smiling with her whole face, the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly how absurd this was and loved it anyway. Written on the bottom in Rose's handwriting, Rose Merriweather Callahan, founder of Sugar and Spice. Life short, frost generously. Claire held the photo between her fingers, studying Rose's face. This woman had built something from nothing, had fixed her own truck, had left behind not just recipes but instructions, not just dreams but tools. She'd prepared for someone to find this, to pick up where she'd left off. The question was whether Claire was that someone. Whether she had whatever quality Rose had possessed that made impossible things feel achievable. Whether desperation was enough fuel to power an engine that had been sitting dead for 4 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vera. Community Center has free woodworking classes Tuesday and Thursday. Man who teaches is Frank Hodges. Fixed Rose's equipment. Call him. Claire stared at the message. A mechanic who'd worked with Rose. Someone who might know this truck's history, its problems, maybe even how to fix it without spending money she didn't have. It felt like another sign, another piece of the universe nudging her forward. Or maybe she was just seeing patterns where none existed, reading meaning into coincidence because the alternative was admitting she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Either way, she had 48 hours before Emma got her hopes up even higher. 48 hours to figure out if this truck was a second chance or just another way to fail. Claire locked the truck and climbed back into the van where Emma was sleeping, curled around Bear like they were one creature. She pulled the sleeping bag over them both and lay awake, listening to her daughter breathe, feeling the weight of every decision she'd ever made pressing down on her chest. Tomorrow she'd call Frank Hodges. Tomorrow she'd figure out the first step. Tomorrow she'd start building something from nothing with $12.40 and a mechanical journal written by a woman she'd never meet. Tonight, she just lay there in the dark, holding Rose's photo, and whispered to the universe, or to Rose, or to herself, "Please let this work. Please." Bear snored. Emma stirred in her sleep. And outside in the parking lot, the bakery truck sat waiting under the Pennsylvania stars, its googly-eyed cupcake grinning at the moon, knowing secrets it would never tell. Wednesday morning arrived with frost on the van windows, and Claire's determination crystallized into something approaching a plan. She called the community center the night before, left a message for Frank Hodges that probably sounded more desperate than professional. He'd called back at 6:30 a.m., his voice gravel in suspicion. "Vera says you bought Rose's truck." "I did." A long pause, weighted with judgment Claire couldn't decode yet. "7 tomorrow morning. Martinez lot. Bring coffee if you want me civil." The line went dead. Claire took that as agreement. Now she stood beside the truck at 6:45, 2 coffees from the gas station cooling in her hands, watching a battered pickup pull into the lot. The man who emerged looked exactly like someone named Frank should look. Weathered hands, thick eyebrows that could intimidate storm clouds, a tool belt slung low like a gunslinger's rig. He was 60-something, built from the kind of lean muscle that came from decades of actual work instead of gym memberships. He walked past Claire without greeting, circling the truck slowly. His inspection was methodical, clinical, the way a surgeon might examine a patient who'd been in a coma for years. He knocked on panels, kicked tires, peered through windows. Finally, he stopped in front of her. "You know anything about engines?" Claire handed him coffee, buying 3 seconds to formulate an answer that wouldn't get her dismissed immediately. "My father owned Donovan Auto Repair. He taught me to rebuild a small block V8 when I was 16. Frank's eyebrows rose fractionally, which she interpreted as the equivalent of enthusiastic applause from this man. Rebuilding a classic car isn't the same as a commercial bakery truck. Then teach me the difference. He studied her over the rim of his coffee cup, and Claire forced herself not to look away. Whatever test this was, backing down felt like failure. Finally, Frank nodded once, sharp and decisive. Pop the hood. The engine bay revealed itself like an archaeological dig, layers of dust and time and neglect. Frank leaned in with a flashlight, his movements precise. He didn't touch anything yet, just looked, and Claire recognized the behavior from watching her father work. First you see, then you understand, then you act. 5 years sitting, fluids are shot, seals probably dried out. Batteries dead as last Tuesday. He pulled a multimeter from his tool belt. Check voltage. Should read 12.6. What's it say? Claire connected the leads, watched the digital display flicker. 8.2. Dead battery, need a new one, 140 at AutoZone. He pulled out a clipboard and started writing, his handwriting surprisingly neat. Oil change, 8 quarts synthetic, $45. Fuel filter, 28. Air filter, 22. Spark plugs, 6 of them, 36 total. Coolant flush, 25. Serpentine belt, 32. Claire watched the numbers accumulate like debt, each one another obstacle between her and functionality. Frank circled the total with aggressive finality. $328, and that's assuming nothing major's broken, which is optimistic bordering on delusional. The number sat in Claire's stomach like a stone. She had $12.40. Even if she could somehow manifest $300 from pure determination, that still left registration, permits, everything else the truck would need before it could legally operate. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I don't have that. Figured. Frank closed his toolbox with a snap that sounded like punctuation. You got anything to trade? Like what? Skills. I need someone to organize my garage. It's been a disaster since my wife died 3 years back. 2 days' work gets you the parts. Claire's throat felt tight. Deal. Don't look grateful yet. Place looks like a tornado married a junkyard and they had kids. He wasn't exaggerating. Frank's garage occupied a steel building behind his house, and stepping inside felt like entering a mechanical graveyard where organization had come to die. Tools covered every surface without system or mercy. Boxes of parts sat unlabeled, mysteries waiting to ambush future Frank with their forgotten purposes. The workbench was buried under projects that might have been started in different decades. Emma came along because Claire couldn't afford childcare, and Frank didn't object. Her daughter immediately appointed herself assistant, taking the job with the kind of seriousness 8-year-olds brought to important missions. Bear appointed himself morale officer, mostly by sleeping in sunbeams and occasionally investigating interesting smells. Claire started with categories. Hand tools separated from power tools. Sockets organized by drive size, then measurement. SAE in one drawer, metric in another, because mixing them was how you lost an entire afternoon hunting for one specific wrench. Emma labeled everything in her careful kid handwriting, tongue poking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. Frank appeared periodically to test her. Hand me a 10mm socket, 3/8 drive. Claire found it in 5 seconds flat, the muscle memory from her father's shop still living in her hands. Frank grunted approval, which she was learning represented his highest form of praise. By the second day, the garage had transformed into something approaching functional. Frank walked through, slowly, running his hand along newly organized shelves like he was seeing his own space for the first time in years. You got your father's eye for systems. He pulled a worn cardboard box from under the workbench. Here, parts for Rose's truck. She'd order them, I'd pick them up, then something would come up and they'd sit. Fuel filters in here, spark plugs, belt, probably save you $60. Claire's chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Why are you helping me?" "Because Rose asked me to." The words came out matter of fact. At her nephew's place, after she got too sick to work, she said if someone found the truck, I should help them. Made me promise. He looked at Claire directly. "I keep my promises." The engine work started the next morning. Frank taught with the patience of someone who understood that knowledge transferred through hands, not just words. They installed the battery together, Frank narrating each step like he was documenting for history. Negative terminal first when removing. Know why? Claire thought back to her father's lessons, heard his voice in her memory. Prevents sparks if the wrench touches the frame. Right. Most people do it backwards. Wonder why they're welding tools to their engine block. The battery connected, dashboard lights flickered to life like a patient coming out of anesthesia. The radio crackled on, still tuned to an oldies station that immediately started playing something from the 70s about love and mistakes. Emma, watching from the truck bed in her cupcake costume, which she now wore approximately 16 hours a day, cheered like they'd just landed on the moon. The oil change happened with Claire underneath the truck on a creeper, Frank beside her pointing out drain plugs and filter mounts. The oil that drained out looked like motor sludge that had achieved consciousness and given up on life. "This oil's been begging for mercy since before you bought the truck." Frank's voice echoed in the tight space under the chassis. "See these bolts? 16 of them. Star pattern removal. Why? Even pressure release. Prevents warping the pan. Your father taught you good." They worked through components systematically. Fuel filter replacement revealed a filter so clogged, Claire was amazed the truck had ever run. Air filter looked like it had been used to strain swamp water. Each part they replaced felt like small victories, incremental progress towards something that might eventually work. But the truck refused to start. It would crank, the starter motor spinning with mechanical optimism, but the engine wouldn't catch. No fuel pressure, Frank diagnosed. They checked the fuel pump, found it dead, replaced it with a junkyard part Frank had in his collection. The truck cranked again. Still nothing. Days blurred together. Emma started school each morning. Claire worked on the truck until pickup time. Then they'd return for evening sessions. Frank was patient in a way that suggested he'd done this before, taught someone mechanical resurrection through sheer persistent attention to detail. He never rushed, never showed frustration when something didn't work, just moved to the next possibility. On day 11, the truck finally started, ran for 30 seconds, then died with a sound like mechanical disgust. Claire threw her wrench safely away from anything breakable and sat hard on the truck's bumper. Her hands were cut in 6 places, knuckles scraped raw from fighting with bolts that hadn't moved in years. Her shoulders ached, her back hurt. She'd been doing this for 11 days and was no closer to having a functional truck than when she started. Emma appeared with a juice box, settled beside her without words. Bear put his massive head in Claire's lap, eyes full of unconditional support that somehow made everything worse because she didn't deserve it. Frank's voice came from above. "Know how many times Rose wanted to quit?" Claire looked up through frustration, threatening to become tears. 47 times. She kept count on the visor. "Go look." Claire climbed into the cab, flipped down the sun visor. And there they were, tiny pencil marks, 47 of them, each one representing a moment of wanting to give up. And then in Rose's handwriting, slightly larger. "But I didn't." Something in Claire's chest unclenched. Rose had felt this, had stood where Claire was standing, wanted to throw wrenches and walk away. But she'd kept going. 47 times she'd chosen to continue instead of quit. Claire's voice came out rough. "Okay, what's next?" "Carburetor rebuild. It's going to take all day, and you're going to hate me halfway through." "Already hate you a little." Frank's mouth twitched, which might have been a smile in a parallel universe. "Good, means you're learning." The carburetor rebuild was exactly as terrible as promised. Tiny parts, precise measurements. Frank's instructions delivered in the tone of someone explaining brain surgery. But by day 17, with Claire's fingers cramping and her patience threadbare, they finished. Frank had her turn the key. The engine cranked, caught, and ran. Rough idle, misfiring on at least one cylinder. But it was running. Actually running. The sound filled the parking lot, mechanical and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Emma erupted from inside the grocery store where she'd been doing homework, screaming with joy. Bear howled like he'd personally fixed the engine through force of will. Frank allowed himself the smallest smile. Not bad, Donovan. Claire's hands shook on the steering wheel. They'd done it. She'd actually done it. The truck was running. Then Frank delivered the next blow. Now the bad news. Registration's expired. By 4 years. Can't legally drive this on public roads without current registration. The victory drained out of Claire like air from a punctured tire. How much? Frank pulled up the Pennsylvania DMV website on his phone, walking her through the fees with the enthusiasm of someone reading obituaries. Back registration penalties, title transfer, commercial vehicle classification, inspection fees. The total came to $625. Claire sat in the idling truck, listening to the engine that finally worked, and felt the weight of impossibility settle back onto her shoulders. She'd spent everything getting this far, had nothing left for the finish line. Can I drive it at all? Private property only. Here's fine, Vera won't care. But you can't sell cupcakes without legal registration. Health department requires it. Catch-22 delivered with mechanical precision. Need money to register, need registration to make money. The truck idled beneath her, finally functional, completely useless. That night, Claire sat in the truck's driver's seat with Rose's recipe notebook, trying to figure out if she'd completely lost her mind. The truck ran but couldn't move. She had recipes but no ingredients. Emma deserved dinner, but Claire had $8 until her next welfare check arrived in 4 days. The smart thing would be to sell the truck as is. Running engine had to be worth something. Maybe she could get $2,000, pay Frank back properly, put a deposit on a studio apartment, stop sleeping in a van that smelled like dog in desperation. But Emma's face when she'd seen the cupcake costume, the way her daughter had run toward possibility instead of away from reality, the way Bear had blessed the truck with his sneeze like he understood something Claire didn't, and Rose's note, if life brought you here, maybe you should finish what I started. Claire opened the recipe section. Rose's handwriting filled pages with instructions that assumed basic competence Claire didn't possess. Cinnamon Sky Swirls required something called a ribbon stage that sounded made up. Lemon Burst involved zesting, which Claire understood in theory but had never attempted in practice. The Mystery Muffin's mystery appeared to be whether anyone could successfully follow the vague instructions. She needed to learn how to bake, fast, with no money for classes and no time for failure. The library became her classroom. 4 hours daily while Emma was at school, Claire sat at the public computer station watching YouTube videos titled Cupcakes for Complete Idiots and Why Your Baking Sucks and How to Fix It. She took notes in a spiral notebook, filling pages with temperature conversions and ingredient ratios and the mysterious difference between baking powder and baking soda that apparently everyone except her understood instinctively. Her first attempt happened 3 days later using the camping stove and a makeshift oven constructed from cardboard and aluminum foil. The results were burnt on the bottom, raw in the middle, and tasted like Claire had weaponized sadness. Bear refused to eat them, which from a dog who regularly consumed grass and his own tail fur represented harsh criticism. Emma tried one bite, her face performing gymnastics, trying to find something polite to say. Mom, these taste like failure? I was going to say sadness, but yeah. Frank appeared that evening with information that transformed everything. You know the truck's oven works, right? Claire stared at him. What? Built-in commercial convection oven. How'd you think Rose baked 200 cupcakes a day? Interpretive dance? The oven, when they hooked it to the truck's generator, worked perfectly. Industrial efficiency, temperature controls that actually corresponded to reality, space for 6 cupcake pans simultaneously. Claire felt like she'd discovered fire after spending weeks trying to cook food by glaring at it aggressively. Her second batch was better. Not good, but better. Third batch was bland, under-seasoned, the texture wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. Fourth batch, she forgot the baking powder entirely, resulting in hockey pucks that could probably stop bullets. Frank's sister Maria appeared on day 6 of baking disasters. She was 58, retired chemistry teacher, and approached baking with the precision of someone who'd spent decades explaining molecular bonds to teenagers who'd rather be literally anywhere else. Leavening, she announced, holding up baking powder like it contained secrets. Chemical reaction. Acid plus base equals carbon dioxide. Creates lift. Baking powder contains both. Baking soda needs external acid, buttermilk, or lemon juice. Get it wrong, you get bricks. She explained gluten development like protein architecture, demonstrated mixing techniques with the authority of someone who'd seen every possible way to mess up. Made Claire buy an oven thermometer because apparently ovens lied constantly and with malicious intent. The thermometer cost $8 Claire didn't have. Vera put it on her tab without comment, the invisible debt growing like interest Claire couldn't afford but accepted anyway. Batches 7 through 25 became Claire's education in failure as a learning tool. Too hot, too cool, overmixed, undermixed, wrong pan size, wrong cooling time, too much vanilla, not enough salt. Each one taught her something. Each one was slightly less terrible than the previous disaster. Batch 26 happened on a Tuesday morning while Emma was at school. Claire followed Rose's vanilla bean classic recipe exactly, incorporating everything she'd learned through 25 failures. The oven thermometer confirmed steady temperature. The mixing stopped the moment ingredients combined. The toothpick came out clean. She pulled the cupcakes from the oven, and they were golden. Actually golden. Dome tops, even color. The smell filling the truck like a promise that maybe the universe occasionally kept its word. Vera tried one when it cooled, her face skeptical because Vera approached everything with suspicion earned through 7 decades of watching people disappoint her expectations. She chewed slowly, swallowed, looked at Claire. Well, that doesn't completely suck. From Vera, it was a standing ovation. Claire nearly cried into the frosting. But success created new problems. She tracked costs obsessively, every ingredient measured against profit margins that needed to exist before she could legally sell anything. Each batch of 144 cupcakes cost $67 in ingredients. Selling at $3.50 each, assuming she sold every single one, would net profit of $338. Except she couldn't sell them. No registration meant no legal sales. No legal sales meant no income. No income meant no money for registration. The cycle was perfect in its cruelty. Claire took a night shift at Target stocking shelves for $12 an hour, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., sleeping 4 hours before Emma woke up. Her body moved through days like a zombie with an ambitious 5-year plan. Frank noticed, said nothing, but started showing up with sandwiches he claimed were extra from lunch. Emma started her own project. The Cupcake Fund, written in crayon on a mason jar, collected bottles and cans from school recycling bins. After 2 weeks, she presented Claire with $4.60 in change. Her face so proud Claire had to turn away pretending to check on the truck because she couldn't let Emma see her cry. Week 5. Frank found Claire asleep standing up, literally unconscious on her feet while leaning against the truck. He grabbed her shoulders before she fell. Donovan, you're going to kill yourself. I'm managing. You're not. You're running on nothing. He studied her with an expression that might have been concern if his face did that sort of thing. How much you short for permits? Claire did the math automatically. Food handler certificate, business license, health inspection, registration. $643. Frank pulled out his checkbook, wrote with the deliberation of someone making an important decision. $650, payment plan, $50 a month when you're profitable. No interest. Frank, I can't, not charity, investment. Rose would want you to succeed, I promised her. Taking the money lets me keep my promise. He held out the check. Your choice. Keep killing yourself on pride, or accept help that comes with clear terms. Claire took the check, hands shaking, and immediately started crying, which was mortifying, but apparently unavoidable. Frank looked horrified, patted her shoulder once with the awkwardness of someone comforting a wild animal, then fled to his truck. The permit marathon consumed the next 3 weeks. Food handler certification required a 4-hour online course about temperature danger zones and cross-contamination. Claire already understood but had to officially learn. Business license meant paperwork at the borough office, where the clerk moved with the urgency of continental drift. Health inspection needed scheduling 3 weeks out, unless Claire wanted to pay a rush fee she couldn't afford. Emma got sick exactly when everything else was falling apart, which felt like the universe had a specific vendetta. Fever of 103, viral infection requiring 3 days in bed, and Claire physically incapable of being two places simultaneously. Vera took over without asking permission. Emma recuperated in the apartment above the grocery store, Vera administering medicine and soup with the efficiency of someone who'd raised 5 children and wasn't impressed by germs. Claire worked double time, knowing every hour cost more than she could repay. Frank showed up to run the truck's register when it wasn't technically open yet, testing equipment and organizing supplies with the focus of someone who needed projects. Maria taught Claire shortcuts for high-volume baking, industrial techniques that sacrificed artistry for efficiency. 3 regular customers who'd been following Claire's progress volunteered to help with cleaning and prep work, saying her cupcakes had made their lunch breaks better and they wanted to pay it forward. The community was building itself around the truck without Claire planning it. People showed up because they wanted to, invested their time because the pink truck with the unhinged cupcake represented something Millbrook needed. Hope, maybe, or just novelty in a town that hadn't seen new business in a decade. 6 weeks after buying the truck, 1 week before the health inspection that would make or break everything, a lawyer's letter arrived. Scott Callahan was contesting the sale, claiming Rose's estate had been improperly liquidated, the truck was family property, and Claire needed to return it immediately or face legal action. Claire sat in the van reading the letter, Emma doing homework beside her, bears sleeping across their feet. She'd spent everything, had permits halfway completed, equipment partially organized, recipes finally mastered, and Rose's nephew wanted it back. The mediation happened in the borough office's smallest conference room, which had apparently been designed for people who hated each other and wanted appropriate seating for their mutual hostility. Scott arrived with a lawyer who wore a suit that cost more than Claire's van. Scott himself was 40-something, clean-cut, the kind of professionally successful person who made Claire feel like she'd failed at being an adult. He brought photos. Rose at the truck's original grand opening in 1994, smiling with fierce joy. Rose and Scott at his law school graduation, her pride evident even through faded Polaroid colors. Rose and a small boy who must have been young Scott, eating cupcakes beside the truck, both covered in frosting. Scott's voice was steady, professional, but underneath Claire heard real grief. My aunt raised me after my parents died. This truck is all I have left of her. I was planning to restore it, donate it to the local historical society, keep her memory alive properly. His lawyer added clinical details about estate law, improper storage procedures, family claims superseding auction sales. The words blurred together into a wall of legal precedent Claire couldn't climb. Then it was her turn. She slid her permits across the table. Food handler certificate, business license application, health inspection scheduled, Frank's mechanical journal with every repair documented, photos on her phone of the engine rebuild, the cleaned interior, Emma in the cupcake costume grinning beside the freshly painted sign. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Your aunt left instructions for whoever found the truck. She wanted it used, not preserved. She left recipes, repair logs, even a costume. Everything someone would need to restart Sugar and Spice except money. She prepared for this. Scott's lawyer started to object, but Claire pulled out the box of cupcakes she'd brought. 4 flavors, batch 26 quality, the best she could make. She opened it carefully. These are Rose's recipes. I followed them exactly. Cinnamon Sky Swirl, Chocolate Thunder, Vanilla Bean Classic, and Lemon Burst. The mediator tried Cinnamon Sky Swirl, eyebrows rising. Scott's lawyer took Chocolate Thunder out of legal obligation. Scott reached for Lemon Burst with the mechanical movement of someone doing something automatic. He bit into it and stopped. His face transformed, professional composure cracking into something raw. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet. She made these for my birthday, every year. This tastes exactly like hers. His voice broke on the last word. Claire waited, watching him process whatever memories the cupcake had triggered. Finally, he looked at her directly. Why do you need this truck? Claire considered lying, softening the truth into something more palatable, then decided Rose deserved better. I'm living in a van with my daughter. We've been homeless for 3 months. This truck is the only chance I've got to change that. Silence filled the room, heavy and expectant. Scott stared at his cupcake, at the photos he'd brought, at something Claire couldn't see. Aunt Rose grew up in a trailer park, talked about it sometimes, how poor they were. She said sugar and spice was her escape from poverty. He looked at his lawyer. I'm dropping the claim. The lawyer's face suggested this was professional malpractice, but knew better than to argue. Scott turned back to Claire. 2 conditions. First, put her photo in the truck. Once a year on her birthday, April 14th, make lemon burst cupcakes. Remember her. I promise. Second, he slid a folder across the table. Her business records, customer lists from the 90s, supplier contacts, everything she kept. If you're doing this, do it right. Don't waste her legacy. They shook hands. Scott left looking like he'd lost something and wasn't sure if he'd made the right choice. Claire sat in the empty conference room, holding Rose's business records, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto shoulders that were already carrying too much. Vera was waiting outside. How much you need for opening day? 300 for ingredients, 400 to be safe. I'll front you 400. Pay me back as you sell. She raised a hand before Claire could protest. You'll pay it back. I've been watching you work. You don't quit. That's worth betting on. That evening, Claire sat in the truck with Emma beside her, Bear at their feet, Frank leaning against the workbench, Vera standing in the doorway with arms crossed. The truck's engine idled, finally functional, legally still stuck in the parking lot, but closer to freedom than it had been. Emma held Rose's photo, tracing the smile with one small finger. She looks happy. She was doing what she loved. Claire pulled Emma closer. Tomorrow we prep. Day after tomorrow we open. And we see if this crazy idea actually works. Frank grunted, which she'd learned to interpret as approval. Vera nodded once. Emma squeezed her hand. Outside, October evening was turning Pennsylvania cold. Inside the truck, the oven's pilot light burned steady, ready for whatever came next. Claire had $400 in borrowed money, permits halfway processed, a truck that ran but couldn't legally leave the parking lot, and recipes from a woman she'd never meet but owed everything. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bet everything on a future that doesn't exist yet. She looked at her daughter, at the people who'd chosen to believe in her for reasons she couldn't entirely understand, at the pink truck that had somehow become the axis her whole life rotated around. Tomorrow they'd find out if faith and flour were enough to build something real from nothing but determination and other people's dreams. Opening day arrived with Claire awake at 4 a.m., her hands steady despite 3 hours of sleep and enough anxiety to power a small city. The truck sat in the Martinez lot under security lights, freshly painted pink, gleaming like a dare. She'd baked through the night, filling the oven with batch after batch until 120 cupcakes sat cooling on improvised racks Frank had welded from hardware store wire. Emma appeared at 5:30 wearing the costume, Bear trotting behind with Gerald the rubber chicken. Her daughter's dedication to the bit was absolute, almost religious. The costume had become armor, transformation, the physical embodiment of belief that today mattered. Ready? Claire's voice carried more confidence than her nervous system felt. Emma nodded so hard the frosting hat wobbled. I was born ready. Also, I practiced my sprinkle dance. Want to see? Save it for customers. By 9 a.m., when Claire officially opened the serving window, exactly 0 customers had appeared. She stood inside the truck arranging cupcakes that didn't need arranging, wiping counters already clean, watching the empty parking lot like it might spontaneously generate people through sheer force of will. 9:30 brought Mrs. Kowalski, 70-something, who bought 2 cupcakes with the careful sympathy of someone supporting a doomed venture. You're very brave, dear. Millbrook needs optimists, even unrealistic ones. The affirmation felt like a funeral eulogy delivered prematurely. Claire took the $7 made change from a cash box containing exactly $43 in startup bills and watched Mrs. Kowalski shuffle away, wondering if this was how dreams died, slowly and politely and alone in parking lots. 11 o'clock brought 3 teenagers, Lanky boys with the eternal suspicion of youth encountering sincerity. They bought cupcakes for what appeared to be ironic purposes, taking photos with Emma, who performed her sprinkle dance with theatrical commitment. They laughed, not unkindly, and walked away eating. Claire watched them go, calculating. 7 customers in 3 hours. $24 gross revenue. At this rate, she'd need approximately 40 years to break even, assuming she didn't die of embarrassment first. Then one of the teenagers posted on Instagram. The caption read, "This cupcake truck lady is trying so hard, but actually these slap?" With 3 photos. The truck's unhinged cupcake mascot, Emma mid-dance, and a close-up of the chocolate thunder showing professional-grade frosting work that frankly surprised Claire herself. Within 30 minutes, 8 more customers appeared. Then 12. The teenager's post was spreading, each share bringing curious people who came for novelty and stayed because the cupcakes were legitimately worth eating. Lauren Mitchell arrived at 1 p.m., red hair pulled back, camera around her neck. The energy of someone who made content creation look effortless. She introduced herself as a food blogger, local following, worked remotely, so she spent lunch breaks hunting interesting food. "I saw the Instagram post. You sold out?" Claire looked at the empty racks. The handful of crumbs remaining from 120 cupcakes vanished in 4 hours. "Yeah, I can make a fresh batch if you wait 40 minutes. "You'll do that? For a food blogger? Absolutely." Lauren stayed photographing the truck's interior while Claire worked. The process became performance, muscle memory, from 26 batches of practice transforming into something approaching competence. Lauren asked questions about Rose, about the truck's history, about Claire's journey from auction to opening day. Claire answered honestly, too tired for strategic omissions, and somehow that rawness became the story's spine. The blog post went live at 6 p.m. Claire only knew because her phone started buzzing with notifications she didn't understand, people tagging and sharing something she hadn't seen yet. Frank appeared with his phone, showing her Lauren's website. Hidden gem alert. Sugar and Spice Mobile Bakery found the best cupcakes outside Pittsburgh in a pink truck behind Martinez Grocery. Owner Claire Donovan makes everything from scratch using recipes from original owner Rose Callahan. The cinnamon sky swirl is perfection. Photos prove it. Go now before word gets out. The photos were professional, making Claire's work look intentional instead of desperate. The review glowed with genuine enthusiasm instead of polite lies. And people were sharing it, hundreds of shares in 3 hours. Millbrook residents discovering something worth caring about in their slowly dying town. Emma read the post over Claire's shoulder, then hugged her with the fierce intensity of 8-year-old vindication. "Mom, we did it." Not quite, Claire thought, but didn't say. They'd had one good day. Success required repetition, consistency, weeks of sustained momentum. But Emma's joy was pure enough to believe in, so Claire hugged her back and let tomorrow's worries wait until tomorrow. The next morning brought 40 people before the truck officially opened. Claire baked frantically, Frank working the register with unexpected facility, Emma dancing in rotation every 30 minutes like clockwork. They sold 150 cupcakes by 2 p.m., would have sold more if Claire had anticipated demand accurately. Days 2 through 7 established pattern. 40 to 60 customers daily. Revenue climbing from $500 to $700 gross. After ingredients, Claire netted $300 to $400 profit per day. She paid Vera $200 toward the ingredient loan, gave Frank $150 early payment that made him grunt disapproval while pocketing the check. She opened a savings account titled Apartment Fund with a $200 deposit that felt simultaneously momentous and inadequate. At this rate, she'd have first and last month's rent in 6 weeks. Security deposit in 8. Emma could have her own bedroom by Christmas if nothing catastrophic happened. Then Steve arrived. Day 8, 7 a.m., Claire was prepping ingredients when a massive food truck pulled into the lot, parking exactly 30 feet away with the territorial confidence of someone claiming disputed land. The truck was triple Sugar and Spice's size, professional-grade equipment, menu offering everything from pizza to tacos to cheesesteaks, and cupcakes, listed right there on the board, competing directly. The owner emerged, 50-something, barrel chest, voice calibrated for maximum projection. "Morning, neighbor. Steve Brennan, Big Steve's Gourmet Street Eats. Claire climbed out of her truck, forcing professional courtesy over immediate territorial hostility. Claire Donovan, welcome to the lot. Steve's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Figured I'd set up here, see how it goes. Public parking, right? First come, first served. He positioned his truck to block street view of Sugar and Spice, started blasting music from external speakers, began waving signs and offering free samples with the aggressive enthusiasm of someone who'd perfected attention capture. His truck was bigger, louder, offered more options. By lunch rush, Steve captured most of the foot traffic before it reached Claire. Day 8 sales, $180 gross, 80 profit. Day 9, Steve arrived earlier, took the optimal position before Claire finished prep. Sales dropped to $120. Day 10 brought $95, barely covering ingredient costs. Claire approached Steve during the mid-afternoon lull, keeping her voice level despite wanting to scream. Can we talk about positioning? This lot's pretty small for 2 vendors. Sure, what's up? You're blocking sight lines to my truck. Can you park further back? Steve's expression shifted into patronizing concern that made Claire's jaw clench. Look, sweetheart, I get it. You got a cute setup here, but I'm running a real business. You want customers? Get a real truck, real menu, real equipment, or get out of the way. The word sweetheart detonated in Claire's skull like controlled explosives. Her fist clenched hard enough that nails bit palms, but screaming at competitors in parking lots wasn't how adults solve problems, regardless of how satisfying it sounded. Her voice came out cold. I have every right to operate here. Then may the best vendor win. He cranked his music louder, effectively ending conversation. Frank witnessed the exchange from his usual position, pretending to inspect the truck's undercarriage. He waited until Steve turned away before speaking. He's trying to starve you out. Classic tactic. Make competition give up through sheer presence. I don't give up. Good, but you need different strategy. Can't outmuscle him. Need to outsmart him. They brainstormed that evening after Emma went to sleep in the van. Quality focus, since Claire's cupcakes were objectively better than Steve's mass-produced alternatives. Niche specialization instead of menu sprawl. Customer loyalty programs that rewarded repeat business. Social media engagement through Lauren's blog and Emma's costume performances. Claire created frequent frosting cards, simple punch system, offering the 11th cupcake free. Emma's sprinkle dance became scheduled entertainment at noon, 3, and 5. Frank built a chalkboard announcing daily special flavors. Lauren promoted Sugar and Spice daily, building narrative around the underdog bakery versus corporate food truck. Week 3 brought stabilization. Steve still dominated lunch rush, but Claire's loyal customers returned specifically for her cupcakes. Sales averaged $350 to $400 daily. Not spectacular, but sustainable. Claire saved $300 toward apartment deposit, paid Vera another $100, started breathing slightly easier. Day 21, while deep cleaning the truck's interior, Claire found something. Behind the oven mounting bracket, wedged so perfectly that only complete disassembly would reveal it, an envelope. Her name written in Rose's handwriting, which was impossible because Rose had died before the auction happened. She sat hard on the truck floor, hands shaking as she opened it. Dear future owner, Rose's words began, and Claire felt time collapse between them. If you found this, you didn't quit. You fought. You won. I'm so proud of you, whoever you are. This truck saved me 30 years ago. I was broke, angry, scared after my divorce. Someone gave me a chance, lent me ingredient money when I had nothing but recipes and stubbornness. I spent 30 years paying that kindness forward. Not to the woman who helped me, she passed long ago, but forward to everyone who needed it. Now it's your turn. Hire the struggling person. Buy from the family supplier. Give the customer the benefit of the doubt. This truck isn't just a business. It's a reminder that we all need second chances. You took yours. You were brave. You honored my legacy by living it, not preserving it. Thank you. With love and flower power, Rose. P.S. The rubber chicken is named Gerald. Don't ask why. Just love him. Claire read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. Rose had known, had planned for exactly this, for someone desperate enough to bid everything on a mystery, for someone brave enough to rebuild what she'd left behind. and Rose was asking her to continue the cycle, to take her second chance and transform it into someone else's first opportunity. The letter changed something in Claire's chest, crystallized her purpose beyond survival. She wasn't just building a business. She was keeping faith with a woman she'd never meet, continuing a legacy of paying forward every kindness received. That evening, Emma found her still sitting in the truck, letter in hand. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Everything's right. I just figured out what we're really doing here." Emma climbed into her lap, reading the letter over Claire's shoulder, with the careful focus of someone decoding important messages. "Are you going to help someone like Frank helped you?" "Yeah, I am." Then Emma got sick. Day 23 morning, Emma's forehead burned at 103 degrees. The viral infection hit fast, transforming healthy kid into miserable patient in 6 hours. Claire took her to the free clinic, waited 4 hours for a doctor who prescribed rest and fluids, and 3 days minimum recovery. 3 days without Emma meant no sprinkle dance, no cupcake costume presents, no 8-year-old ambassador generating goodwill through pure enthusiasm. But more critically, 3 days meant Claire couldn't simultaneously nurse a sick child and run a business that required 16-hour days. Vera appeared at the van that evening, knocking with the efficiency of someone making executive decisions. "Emma stays in my apartment. I'll watch her. You work." "Vera, I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm telling. Now hand me that child before I get bossy." Emma moved upstairs, bundled in blankets, fever reducing her to sleepy confusion about why Vera's apartment smelled like cinnamon and old books. Claire returned to the truck feeling hollow, grateful, and guilty in proportions she couldn't measure. The community filled gaps without coordination, like some collective consciousness recognized need and responded. Frank ran the register for 4 hours daily, handling transactions with minimal conversation and maximum efficiency. Maria arrived to help with high-volume baking, teaching shortcuts while chattering about her grandchildren's soccer achievements. 3 regular customers, people whose names Claire barely knew, volunteered for cleaning and prep work, saying that cupcakes had improved their lunch breaks and they wanted to help. Emma recovered on day 26, fever breaking overnight, energy returning with the resilience of youth. She appeared at the truck wearing her costume, slightly thinner but grinning, and customers actually cheered. Sales jumped to $550 that day, celebration disguised as commerce. The Millbrook Food Festival invitation arrived via email day 30. Annual event, 30 vendors, 2,000 attendees, vendor fee then $150. Claire stared at the application, calculating risk versus reward. Festival could generate massive exposure, or could cost money she'd lose if the day went badly. Frank made the decision for her. "Rose did festivals, always her biggest sales days. You should go." "That's a lot of money if it fails." "It won't. You're ready." Vera covered the vendor fee without being asked, adding it to Claire's invisible tab that grew like compound interest on borrowed belief. Festival prep consumed 2 weeks. Claire practiced high-volume production, timing batches to maximize oven capacity. Created festival-exclusive flavor, Rose's Remembrance, essentially lemon burst with edible gold sprinkles that cost more than reasonable but looked elegant enough to justify premium pricing. Emma designed new signage. Frank built a second display table from plywood and determination. Festival day, Claire woke at 3 a.m., started baking with the systematic focus of someone conducting surgery. 300 cupcakes by 9 a.m., transported in coolers Vera provided. The truck positioned in premium location assigned to Sugar and Spice Mobile Bakery with official signage that made Claire's chest tight with pride. Opening bell at 10. The line formed immediately, 40 people deep, curious festival goers attracted by Lauren's blog posts and Emma's costume and the pink truck that looked like childhood nostalgia weaponized. Claire, Frank, and Emma worked with assembly line precision, hands moving faster than thought, the rhythm of transaction becoming meditation. By noon, 150 cupcakes sold. By 2 p.m., 250 vanished into enthusiastic crowds. By 3 p.m., Claire was frantically baking more in the truck's oven, working while Frank handled sales. Emma danced for growing audiences who filmed her performance with phones held high. The fresh batch, 80 cupcakes produced under festival pressure, Sold out by 5:30 p.m. Total, 330 cupcakes. Gross revenue, $1,155. Profit after ingredients and vendor fee, approximately $600 earned in 8 hours. Claire sat on the truck's back bumper after closing, hands cramping, feet aching, watching Emma collapse dramatically onto Frank's jacket spread across the ground. Bear had spent the day greeting customers with political candidate enthusiasm, was now sleeping with Gerald clutched between paws like comfort object. A man in business casual approached, extending business card with the formality of someone making official offers. Jeff Hammond, property manager for Millbrook Downtown Plaza. Saw your operation today. Impressive. Claire took the card automatically, brain too fried for sophisticated processing. Thanks. I manage retail space on Main Street. Corner spot just opened up. High foot traffic, great visibility. Interested in permanent location? The words took 3 seconds to penetrate exhaustion fog. Permanent location. Real spot, not parking lot charity. Actual address instead of GPS coordinates, fufa for a truck that wasn't legally allowed to move anyway. How much monthly? $250. Prime corner. Includes utilities. 30-day rolling lease initially. Option for annual after 6 months. $250 monthly was manageable with current revenue. Barely, but manageable. It meant commitment, meant believing this success was repeatable instead of festival anomaly. It meant stepping out of the safety of borrowed space into independence that could collapse if sales dropped. Claire heard herself responding before conscious thought approved. I need to think about it. Take my card. Offer stands through end of month. He left. Frank stood slowly, joints protesting a day of standing. You should take it. What if sales fall? What if this was just festival luck? Risk is part of business. Rose was scared to start too, but she did. He looked at Emma, asleep on his jacket, exhausted from dancing for strangers. That kid believes in you. Maybe believe in yourself. The decision took 3 days of Claire lying awake in the van, calculating disaster scenarios against optimistic projections. She made spreadsheets on library computers, tracked historical sales, estimated realistic monthly revenue. The math worked if nothing catastrophic happened. The math collapsed if Emma got sick again, if the truck broke down, if Steve decided to follow her to Main Street, if any of 10,000 variables shifted wrong. Emma ended the debate with 8-year-old logic that cut through Claire's analysis paralysis. Mom, you're not scared anymore, right? I'm terrified. Then let's do it. Being scared means it matters. Out of the mouths of children came wisdom adults spent decades unlearning. Claire called Jeff Hammond, committed to Main Street Corner, signed in paperwork that made her hands shake. Sugar and Spice Mobile Bakery would have real address, permanent location, existence independent of Vera's charity. The move happened on a Tuesday. The truck, still not legally allowed on public roads, got towed to Main Street by Frank's friend, who owed him favors accrued over decades of reciprocal assistance. Millbrook residents stopped to watch the pink truck pass through downtown, some waving, some filming, some looking confused about when their dying town got interesting. The new location transformed everything. Corner visibility meant walk-by traffic from office workers, students, shoppers who didn't know Sugar and Spice existed. The truck became landmark, meeting point, destination instead of accident. Sales climbed from 400 daily to 550, then 600, stabilizing around 700 as reputation solidified. 2 weeks into the Main Street location, Tracy Bennett appeared, 28, single mom of 2, desperation poorly hidden behind professional demeanor. She asked about work with the careful hope of someone who'd been turned down too many times. Claire recognized the look instantly, the way survival dressed itself in respectability while screaming internally. The resume in hand, printed at a library. The clothes that were clean but worn. The fear of rejection competing with need for opportunity. You have childcare figured out? Tracy's face fell slightly. Working on it. I can be flexible on hours, whatever you need. I'm asking because I need to know your constraints so we can work around them. 15 an hour, part-time, flexible schedule. When can you start? Tracy's eyes went wet. Tomorrow, thank you. God, thank you. Don't thank me. Just show up and work hard. She did. Tracy proved competent, reliable, willing to learn baking techniques while managing register with efficiency born from years in retail customer service. Having help meant Claire could breathe, could occasionally sleep 6 hours instead of 4, could pretend she was building something sustainable instead of constantly drowning. 3 months after opening day, Claire had saved $2,400 in the apartment fund. Vera's upstairs space became available. 2 bedrooms, bathroom with actual bathtub that Emma discussed with religious fervor, kitchen where meals could happen at tables instead of camping stoves. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, $1,950 total. Claire counted the money at Vera's kitchen table, Emma and Tracy both watching with invested interest. "We're really doing this," Tracy whispered. She'd been living in her car for the 6 weeks she'd worked at Sugar and Spice, parking in different lots to avoid police attention, showering at the YMCA, feeding her kids with wages that barely stretched to cover food. Claire looked at Tracy, saw herself 3 months ago, remembered Rose's letter about paying forward. The apartment had 2 bedrooms. Emma was small enough to share with Claire for a few more months, and Tracy had 2 kids who deserved better than a car. The words came out before careful consideration could stop them. "What if we both moved in? Split the rent. Your kids get the 2nd bedroom, Emma bunks with me for now. 12 months, we save up together, then you get your own place." Tracy stared like Claire had suggested time travel. "You do that?" "Someone gave me a chance when I deserved nothing. Rose gave me a truck. Frank gave me tools and teaching. Vera gave me space and credit." Claire held Rose's letter, the paper worn from rereading. "Now it's my turn to give someone else a shot. Plus, I could use a roommate who knows not to let Bear eat the sofa." Tracy's face crumpled, tears arriving with the force of relief held too long. Emma squealed, already planning shared bedroom arrangements with Tracy's daughters. Vera watched with the satisfaction of someone whose investment paid dividends beyond money. The apartment filled slowly with second-hand furniture and compromise, and the chaos of 3 kids and 1 dog learning to share space. Tracy's daughters, 6 and 4, treated Emma like a combination big sister and celebrity because of the cupcake costume. Bear appointed himself guardian of all 3 children, taking his duties seriously enough to sleep across the hallway between bedrooms. Tracy proved more than competent worker. She had ideas about marketing, about menu expansion, about operational efficiency that came from years managing retail chaos. Within 2 months, Claire offered partnership, 20% ownership, equal voice in business decisions, profit sharing based on contribution. "Why buying?" Tracy asked, the question holding years of waiting for catches and conditions. "Because someone gave me a chance. Rose gave me a truck when I had nothing. Now I'm passing it forward. You've earned this." Claire pulled out partnership paperwork she'd had a lawyer draft. "We grow this together." They shook hands, partnership sealed through belief instead of capital investment. Claire felt Rose watching somehow, approving this choice to keep the cycle moving forward. 6 months after buying the truck for $312.40, Sugar and Spice occupied Main Street corner like it had always belonged there. Spring arrived in Pennsylvania with the tentative warmth of winter admitting defeat. The truck's pink paint glowed in afternoon sun. Emma's sprinkle dance had evolved into full choreography. Bear greeted customers with Gerald permanently attached to his mouth. Claire stood at the oven, frosting cupcakes with muscle memory earned through hundreds of batches. Tracy worked register, making change and recommendations with the easy confidence of someone invested in outcome beyond paycheck. Frank stopped by for quality control, his euphemism for free coffee and conversation. Vera brought produce for special orders, claiming she was just passing by, despite Martinez Grocery being 4 blocks away. Lauren photographed new menu items for her blog that had become Millbrook Food Authority. The line kept forming, 30 people deep, Millbrook residents and tourists drawn by reputation that spread through social media and word of mouth. Office workers on lunch break. Families with kids who wanted to see the dancing cupcake girl. Teenagers filming content. Elderly couples who remembered Rose's original Sugar and Spice and swore Claire's cinnamon sky swirls tasted exactly like they remembered. Emma danced outside, costume spinning, bear dancing beside her, both of them creating joy that cost nothing and meant everything. Tracy's daughters watched from the truck window, learning that work could look like this, that dreams could be built from flour and determination and other people's kindness. Claire glanced at Rose's photo mounted above the dashboard, at Danny Callahan's picture Frank had provided showing Rose's husband, who'd taught her engine maintenance before he passed. The letter was framed beside them, reminder of purpose beyond profit. She whispered to them both, knowing they couldn't hear but feeling the need to say it anyway. We did it. We kept your dream alive. Thank you for the chance. The oven timer dinged, another batch ready, another dozen customers waiting. Claire pulled the cupcakes out, arranged them in the display case with the care Rose would have recognized. Perfect domes, even color, the smell of possibility wrapped in sugar and butter. This was what second chances looked like. Not dramatic transformations or lottery wins, just showing up every day, working hard, paying forward every kindness received, building something worth having from nothing but determination and other people's dreams. Emma twirled outside, costume catching light, and a little girl in the line pointed with delight. Mommy, look, a dancing cupcake. Tracy made change for a customer, laughing at something Frank said. Bear greeted a regular with his tail wagging hard enough to be classified as dangerous weapon. Vera appeared with fresh strawberries for tomorrow's special batch, claiming she'd accidentally ordered too many, which was obvious lie that everyone accepted. The line kept forming, Millbrook kept buying, and Claire kept baking, because that's what you did when the universe gave you a pink truck and instructions to frost generously. You showed up, you worked hard, you took your second chance and built something real. You became the person who gives chances to others, because that's how legacies survive. Not through preservation, but through living them forward, one cupcake at a time. Sometimes that was enough, sometimes it was everything.
Neon Ult.
Sorry. Die ist Window reingegangen. Geil.
Wir tun uns auf Spielen. Ja, ich auch nicht, aber hey. Das nimmt man doch mit.
Ja, wenigstens ein bisschen Damage machen.
Genau, wenn es mir jemand schenkt, nehme ich's Bundle. Exactly, Cheesy, exactly. So.
Fredi, machen wir immer eine TV-Pause hier. Jede Runde. Gesundheit.
Yes, yes.
Ich könnte mir vorstellen, dass die auf einer Seite Info holen mit Zopa und auf der anderen pushen.
Das ist eher für Line-Up Larry.